The plate is set. The heat rises from the meal you have prepared or ordered, but your hands do not reach for the utensils. Instead, they hover, tense and searching, reaching for the device. The room is quiet, but inside your chest, there is a rising frequency, a subtle, vibrating anxiety that prohibits the simple act of beginning. You cannot take the first bite. Not yet. Not until the environment has been curated. You spend 5-10 minutes scrolling. The specific content matters less than its function as a shield. The food cools, the textures harden, but the physical hunger is secondary to a more urgent psychological appetite, the need for noise. To eat in silence feels dangerously exposed. It is not boredom, it is an intolerance for the void. Without the external stream of voices or images, the silence of the room amplifies the sound of your own chewing, the rhythm of your breath, and worse, the unchecked volume of your own thoughts. It feels like being locked in a room with a stranger you have successfully avoided all day. The screen is not entertainment, it is a pacemaker. It provides a rhythm that your own nervous system can no longer generate on its own. You are building a buffer zone between your consciousness and your biology. When the battery dies or the internet fails, the panic that ensues is not about boredom. It is the terror of a regulation mechanism failing. You are not watching because you are interested. You are watching because the alternative is a confrontation with a quiet that feels heavy, judgmental, and impossibly loud. To the outside observer, this ritual looks indistinguishable from addiction. Parents, partners, or colleagues sitting across the table see a glazed expression, a refusal to engage in the shared reality. They diagnose it with casual confidence. They call it dopamine dependency. They say you have a shattered attention span, that your brain has been eroded by short-form algorithms, or that you have lost the capacity for basic human presence. They perceive the glowing rectangle as a toy, and your attachment to it as a childish inability to delay gratification. Just put it away, they suggest, framing it as a simple choice between etiquette and rudeness. They interpret your need for a backdrop as a personal slight. If you are eating with them, checking your phone is an insult. If you are eating alone, they imagine you are simply entertaining yourself, unable to sit with your own thoughts because you are intellectually shallow. They see a consumer devouring content alongside calories, seeking constant, rapid-fire stimulation. The judgment is absolute. You are disconnected, overstimulated, and hollowed out by modern technology. They view the device as the parasite, but they are looking at the tourniquet and calling it the wound. They do not understand that the screen is not a source of pleasure, but a crudely effective form of medication. They assume you are chasing a high, when in reality, you are frantically trying to establish a baseline. They see a person checking out of the world. They do not see the person trying to dampen a hyper-awareness where the silence of a room feels not peaceful, but predatory. This misunderstanding creates a secondary layer of shame. You begin to eat alone not for the solitude, but to avoid the gaze that labels your survival strategy as a character flaw. But the isolation is not free. It is a debt accruing interest in the background of your nervous system. Consider the biological contradiction you are forcing your body to endure. Digestion is a vulnerable act. Evolutionarily, an animal only eats when it perceives the environment as secure enough to lower its defenses. This process requires the engagement of the parasympathetic nervous system, the state of safety, recovery, and rest and digest. But your baseline state, when left to the naked silence of a room, is not rest. It is a low-grade sympathetic activation. You are vibrating with an undefined, hovering vigilance. When you attempt to eat without the screen, you are asking your body to accept fuel while your nervous system is signaling a need for mobilization. The result is a subtle somatic dissonance. The throat feels tight. The stomach remains knotted. The food feels like an intrusion rather than nourishment. The screen resolves this tension not by creating safety, but by inducing a controlled dissociation. It hijacks the visual and auditory pathways, occupying the specific processing centers that would otherwise be scanning the environment for threats or scanning the self for discomfort. It allows you to go offline, just enough to perform the biological function of eating. But this is a rental of peace, not ownership. The cost of this rental is the progressive atrophy of your own self-regulation hardware. The vagus nerve, which connects the brain to the gut and dictates your ability to shift from anxiety to calm, requires practice to remain toned. Every time you outsource this regulation to a digital input, the internal muscle weakens. You are structurally training your brain to believe that it is incapable of returning to baseline without external assistance. Over months and years, the silence becomes heavier. It is no longer just quiet. It is pressurized. The backlog of unprocessed thoughts, which you have systematically drowned out with content, begins to accumulate like sediment in a blocked pipe. You begin to feel a growing intolerance for even micro moments of stillness, waiting for the microwave, waiting for a red light. The exhaustion you feel is not from a lack of sleep, but from the metabolic cost of constantly holding the dam against this rising internal water level. You are not merely watching a video, you are paying a ransom to your own nervous system. To understand why the screen is non-negotiable, we must dismantle the mechanics of attention, specifically through the lens of perceptual load theory. The human brain possesses a finite amount of processing power at any given millisecond. It is a strict biological bandwidth limit. When the external environment is low stimulation, a quiet kitchen, a silent table, your brain has massive surplus processing capacity. In the absence of a demanding external target, this surplus automatically turns inward. It activates the default mode network, the neurological matrix responsible for self-reference, memory retrieval, and, crucially, interoception. Interoception is your brain's ability to sense the internal state of your body, the rhythm of your heart, the expansion of your lungs, the constriction of your gut. For a regulated nervous system, these signals are neutral, grounding data. But for a system that has acclimated to chronic vigilance or unresolved stress, interoceptive signals are registered as threat alerts. The silence does not just feel quiet, it feels like a high-definition broadcast of your own internal instability. The act of eating itself increases this volume, drawing awareness to the very core of your physical vulnerability. The video is not entertainment, it is an attentional jamming signal. It functions on the same neurological principle used in pain management, where patients are distracted to lower their perception of agony. By flooding your visual and auditory cortices with high-density information, dialogue, music, rapid cuts, you are deliberately maxing out your perceptual load. You are creating a traffic jam in your own sensory pathways. When the brain is fully engaged in processing the external narrative, it lacks the bandwidth to process the internal one. It is a zero-sum game of neural resources. This is a functional, strategic numbness. You are utilizing the screen to sever the connection between your consciousness and your viscera. You are performing a temporary dampening of your own felt sense. The video allows you to eat as a machine eats, mechanically, without the emotional or somatic resonance of the act. You are successfully hiding from your own biology behind a wall of pixels. But this mechanism reveals a terrifying dependency. If the only way you can endure the simple act of nourishment is by blinding yourself to your own physical presence, what exactly is the specific frequency of silence that you are trying so desperately not to hear? This is not an addiction to entertainment. It is a structural intolerance for intimacy with the self. What you dismiss as boredom is actually the precise threshold where your internal noise exceeds your capacity to metabolize it. The screen is not a toy. It is a prosthetic regulator. You are utilizing an external device to perform the soothing function that a healthy nervous system should perform autonomously. You are not watching in the traditional sense. You are calibrating. You select a video with the specific emotional temperature required to neutralize your current internal state. If the silence feels too sharp, you choose a dense, chaotic narrative to dull the edge. If your mind is racing, you choose something repetitive and predictable to force a deceleration. You are acting as your own anesthesiologist, carefully titrating the dose of external stimulation to keep your own consciousness within a livable range. This completely reframes the behavior. You are not a lazy consumer rotting your brain with cheap dopamine. You are a hyper-vigilant organism attempting to manufacture a safe container in an unsafe internal world. You have discovered that if you can fully occupy the visual and auditory channels, you can bypass the threat detection system long enough to perform the vulnerability of eating. It is a brilliant, desperate adaptation. But this survival strategy carries a brutal implication. If you require a prosthetic to simply exist in a chair for 20 minutes, then your natural state has become uninhabitable to you. You have successfully engineered a way to survive your own company, but only by ensuring that you are never actually there to witness it. This mechanism does not remain contained in the kitchen. Once your nervous system learns that it can successfully outsource its regulation to a digital pacer, it begins to apply this solution to every unprotected coordinate of your life. The strategy metastasizes. You can trace its expansion by looking at the other moments where your body is engaged in automatic, rhythmic behavior. Moments where the mind is dangerously free to wander. Consider your sleep hygiene. It is likely you can no longer drift into unconsciousness in a quiet room. The transition from waking to sleeping is the ultimate surrender of control, a moment where the executive brain goes offline and the subconscious begins to surface. For a regulated system, this is a soft descent. For you, it is a free fall. To mitigate this, you curate a specific auditory environment, a podcast, a stream, a familiar show played at low volume. You are not listening to acquire information. You are using the human voice as a tether. You require a simulated presence to stand guard while you let your defenses down. You do not fall asleep after the content ends. You fall asleep against it. If the internet cuts out or the playlist stops, you jolt awake, not because of a noise, but because of the sudden, violent return of the silence. Trace this pattern into the bathroom. The shower was once a sanctuary of sensory isolation. The sound of water, the steam, the privacy. Now, it is another vacuum to be filled. You balance the phone on the sink or bring a speaker into the stall. You cannot endure the 10 minutes of washing without a narrative overlay. The physical sensation of the water is not enough to occupy your bandwidth. It leaves too much room for the internal monologue to start its interrogation. You must drown out the sound of your own existence with the sound of someone else's. Look at your transit, the commute, the walk to the store, the waiting room. The moment you step out the door, the headphones go on. This is not just about entertainment, it is about environmental control. The world is chaotic and unpredictable. The audio feed is curated and linear. By locking your attention onto a digital track, you create a tunnel through the chaos. You are raw dogging nothing. You are insulating yourself from the friction of the present moment. You have effectively eliminated the in-between spaces of your life. There is no longer a gradient between activity and rest, or between one task and another. There is only the task and the distraction. The logic is consistent and ruthless. Any activity that requires low cognitive load, eating, folding laundry, driving, showering, creates a surplus of attention. That surplus is the danger zone. In a healthy state, That surplus allows for daydreaming, processing, and creative synthesis. In your state, that surplus is a vacuum that immediately sucks in anxiety, intrusive thoughts, or a crushing sense of loneliness. So, you plug the gap. You fill every cubic inch of spare mental capacity with high-density data. You have constructed a life where you are never technically alone with your own thoughts for more than the few seconds it takes to switch apps or skip an ad. You have achieved a total colonization of your own silence. But notice the fragility of this architecture. You are functioning, yes. You are eating, sleeping, and working. But you are doing so by maintaining a continuous, artificial life support system for your attention. You are not living in your life. You are hovering slightly above it, tethered to a screen that keeps you from touching the ground. You have become a ghost in your own daily routine, present in body but absent in attention, forever looking through a window at a world you are terrified to actually enter. The ultimate cost of this adaptation is not moral, it is metabolic. By systematically outsourcing your emotional regulation to an external device, you have triggered a process of profound internal atrophy. The brain operates on a ruthless use it or lose it principle. Every time you reach for the screen to quell a rising wave of anxiety or boredom, you are robbing your own nervous system of the opportunity to calibrate itself. You are preventing the formation of the psychological calluses required to endure the friction of simply being alive. Over time, this creates a structural fragility. Because you have successfully avoided the micro-stresses of silence and solitary eating, your tolerance for any form of distress has flatlined. Minor inconveniences now register as major threats. A slow internet connection, a quiet waiting room, a dead battery. These do not just annoy you, they induce a disproportionate, clawing panic. You have become biologically dependent on a digital pacemaker to maintain your own heartbeat. More dangerously, this strategy creates a massive backlog of unprocessed experience. The human mind requires idle time, the very silence you are destroying, to archive memories, process emotions, and make sense of the day. This is the default mode function you are actively suppressing with your high-load distraction. By jamming the signal with constant input, you are preventing your brain from filing away your own life. You are consuming content, but you are not digesting existence. The result is a strange, hollow exhaustion. You feel mentally stuffed, yet spiritually malnourished. You have watched 1,000 hours of content, yet the days blur together in a static haze. You are achieving survival, but you are sacrificing continuity. You have traded the sharp, terrifying texture of reality for a smooth, numbing flow of data. And, as with any painkillers, tolerance builds. The videos that once soothed you now barely hold your attention. You need them faster, louder, shorter. You are pressing the volume button harder, desperately trying to maintain the seal. But the silence is getting heavier, and it is starting to bleed through the cracks. The next time you sit down to eat, pay attention to the exact moment the video ends. The screen goes black, and for a split second, before the autoplay kicks in, or before you can scroll to the next feed, you catch a glimpse of your own reflection in the dark glass. In that microsecond, the silence rushes back into the room, like air into a vacuum. The chewing sounds loud. The hum of the refrigerator becomes audible. The barrier you erected dissolves, and the reality of your solitude reasserts itself with immediate physical weight. You will feel a reflex, almost a spasm in your chest, a frantic urge to tap, to refresh, to re-establish the noise. You will not be able to stop yourself. You will find another video. You will restore the shield. But in that brief, terrifying interval of quiet, ask yourself one question. You have spent years perfecting a system to ensure you never have to sit alone with the person in the chair. You have curated the entire world to avoid this specific confrontation. But the meal is finishing, the battery is draining, and eventually, the screen will stay dark. When the noise finally stops, who is the person waiting for you in the silence?